really very.
Okay. So, tell me a little bit about how you got in the field and how you ended up in this pre-K classroom. And
I went to grade school here, so I grew up in Vienna.
Wow.
My grandmother my mother actually did her student teaching, I believe, here in Vienna. I know that she subbed for a while, and she's been teaching for 30 years. And my grandmother was the head cook here my entire life. She just retired a few years ago, so it was really neat getting to work with her. But when I graduated from college, the next year, the pre-K coordinator retired. So it was fortunate timing for me.
Wow.
So
Great.
I came in and interviewed, and I'm teaching and raising my kids now in the grade school that I grew up in.
Did you study early childhood
Yes.
education in particular? Like, is your certification in early
My
childhood?
certification is early childhood, so birth through third grade.
Birth through third. Okay, great. In Illinois?
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Yes.
Okay. And how long have you been a teacher here?
This is my 7th year.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, and has Mr. Frenner been your principal all of those 7 years?
Mm-hmm. It was his first year. He was the principal, and the year I started was his first year as superintendent. And then we had another principal for...
Has that changed anything? The fact that he is both superintendent and principal?
Not really. It's given him a lot more responsibility.
I'm sure.
But he was always, because he's the one that... I mean, the principal who was here was a wonderful man, but I felt just as comfortable going straight to Mr. Frainer as I did the principal whenever he was here.
Have you felt that his instructional leadership has changed in the 7 years? The kind of supports or the nature of how you work together has that, as specific to early childhood, has that changed in the 7 years? Uh-huh.
No, he's, working in the school system or in the school building. Then I'm also included in any of the in-services or the workshops that they have. But he's always been wonderful at, there are things like if they're having a workshop on park testing, it's important for me to understand what the kids are going to eventually go to, and how to prepare them. But it's not really very specific to
It doesn't happen
my
until like
class.
third grade or something.
Right.
Right.
So at least twice a year, usually, me and the other early childhood teachers in Johnson County will have an early childhood symposium. And Greg is always wonderful at helping me. He'll say, hey, on this date, we're going to have an in-service. That would be a good afternoon I want you here in the morning to do this, but in the afternoon, that'd be a great time if you want to coordinate your symposium. And he says we can have it here if we want. If not, if you want to go to New Simpson Hill, there's usually once a year we'll go visit at least 2 other classrooms. And that is the most helpful workshop that we have. I think specifically for our grade. It gives us a chance to go in and see, this is what the state wants. How are you providing it? How are you doing it? That's a really great idea. And then we'll usually end up calling or texting or emailing each other saying, hey, where did you find that resource? Or email that to me. That things like no knit policies. I've had
so
teachers.
You would say that you have like an ongoing personal relationship with these other teachers.
Yes.
How did that get started?
I know that with the competitive grant, when it became so competitive, about 5 years ago, was it 5 years ago? Well, I know that's one thing in our compliancy checklist is that they like to see, kind of a network between early childhood teachers in that area. So the pre-K coordinator from New Simpson Hill just called around. I'm not sure if it was her actually or her administrator that contacted the other administrators in the area and started it.
So it's part of the pre-K grant.
It is
It was
recommended
it was
by the
sort of
pre-K
like,
grant.
that was an impetus to
Yes.
make you want to get together.
Yes.
So how many schools are involved in that sort of network?
It's Goreville, Cypress, us, New Simpson Hill, and it has been Head Start before. They're not as...
So maybe six other
Yes.
preschools. Do you find that most of the other preschools are single classrooms in their buildings?
Goreville is the only one that I believe has 2 classrooms.
Okay.
But Goreville, that might not be true because I know that their Head Start is also in the Goreville building. So one classroom is the preschool for all, and the classroom right next door is Head Start. So I can't ever figure theirs out because
Right.
they keep some kids all day, and Head Start keeps some kids all day, and then they switch kids sometimes. So it's confusing.
Our funding systems create illogical kinds of things sometimes that are like don't make any sense.
Well, it seems to make sense
'Cause you
to them,
get
but I
pre-K
can't ever
you get
understand.
Head Start kids too, don't
Yes.
you? Some.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like, well, why would you just take them? Why don't you just leave them with one teacher
Mm-hmm.
and their whole? That switch seems not very
Especially
useful.
for 3-year-olds who still nap.
Sure.
The first week of school is a lot of crying, and we quickly
I
realize
bet.
who needs a nap and who.
So tell me a little bit about how often does Mr. Frenner come down to your room, and
Honestly, before he was principal and superintendent, it would be at least once a week just to pop in. Now he just doesn't really have the time. I know he's teaching a class now, a leadership class for the junior high kids. So he may come in once a month. Usually anytime he has something to discuss with me, or anytime he sends an email, he'll just pop in and say, hey, check your email, I sent that to you, and it just kind of gives the kids a chance to go, hi, Mr. Frainer. When we pass him in the hallway, he'll stop and give each of the kids 5, which I like because a lot of kids think, if they get in trouble, they're going to the principal's office.
when he pops his head in on those very informal times, does he ever stop to observe the classroom? How long is he
He
in the
usually,
room?
5 minutes maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I'm playing or observing, he doesn't usually interrupt. He'll wait until I'm finished, and while I'm, doing an activity, he'll just kind of stand around and talk to the other kids. And he has a little boy that's 2. I believe he's 2 now. So he, he'll say, my Knox has that, or hey, I need to get that for Knox.
So do you get any feedback from those little informal pop-in visits?
No. Not unless it's really an evaluation.
So let's talk about your evaluations. How often do you have them?
It was every year until I was tenured, which wasn't
Uh-huh.
very long ago. So now it's every other year.
And what do they consist of?
There's a pre-observation where first we,
Is this a formal, or do you have a formal and then informal, or do you have two observations that's part of that evaluation process? Or
nope,
just one?
just one,
Uh-huh.
I believe.
Okay.
But, being a small school, I do, like I said, see him so often that I really think it's just one.
Okay.
We'll settle on a date, and then I have a form to fill out that will discuss, my preset, how I'll,
It's about the form itself is about the lesson that you're going to be
yes,
observed on.
how I'll introduce it, and, the lesson itself, the standards that it will touch, and anything that we would like for him to know, such as, one student, because my kid's 3 to 5, my classroom's going to look very different than a 7th grade classroom, obviously. And there are some kids who the activity is going to be, the goal for one child is very different than for the other child. So there's a space for us to explain to him, if this child is not on task, this child's goal right now is to sit. So that he knows that we are still.
You're really accomplishing something if he can sit for 3 minutes.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. And then he comes and observes.
He comes and observes. Well, we have a pre-observation meeting where we basically go over all of that. And then he comes and observes. And then once he observes, then I will get a copy of my evaluation and usually a copy of just notes he had taken, open-ended questions that I had asked, the differentiated instruction, or differentiated instruction. And then we'll have another meeting afterwards to talk about what went well, what we could do differently, and just kind of, usually, because it's pre-K and not just a classroom, then we have many meetings throughout the year, what's working well for the program, what could we do differently. Because it is a small building, he is very open to any time that I have any issue or question, I can go to him and say, hey, listen, just so you know, and because I do have my parents pick up and drop off in the classroom, so I get the chance to talk to them every day. So anytime something comes up, I'll just pop into his office or catch him in the hallway and say, hey, listen, just so you know, this student said that they haven't seen Dad in a few days.
Right.
And that they're talking a lot more about Grandma, so just want you to know, because there's other kids, they may have other siblings in the school.
How do you feel that formal observation process, how helpful is it in your teaching practice? Do you think it affects, as a reason, is it just something you kind of do to kind of go through the motions and make sure the district paperwork is done?
No, I actually think it's really helpful.
There's some actual value to it?
Oh, there's a lot of value to it, I think, because I've had, not with Mr. Freiner, but when we had a principal, I had a lesson plan that just bombed. It was a lesson that it just didn't go as planned. And when I sat down for the evaluation, the principal said, you did great. That happens. Sometimes you have things that, the kids, they're either, I don't remember what it was, but I remember saying I should have done more introduction into it. We were comparing something, it was about this time of the year, comparing maybe 2 stories. And I said, I wish I would have done more introduction into the stories, but he said, but it didn't go as you had planned, but you still kept them on task. They were still learning. He said, that's teaching, and that's teaching 3 to 5-year-olds. So that was helpful. And Mr. Freiner's actually told me, just in conversation and in the evaluation, he said that is one of your strengths, is the impromptu teaching moments.
Anything else about the formal evaluation, why you think it's useful or helpful or beneficial?
No.
Talk to me a little bit about the professional development, that in-service training that the school provides. You have some, I don't know how, he didn't tell me how often it was, but I know that you have.
Goodness. I wonder if he has a calendar in here.
It's okay. It's not that critical that it's...
We have at least 2 in-service days at the beginning of the year. Probably 2 throughout the year, and then 1 at the end of the year.
So maybe about 6 per year.
Yeah.
And then, so what is done at those?
Well, we have, just in the last few years, created a leadership development team in just among the staff. And the last few years, the in-services have been team building exercises and just things like that. I know the beginning of the year is always getting everyone amped up, and Mr. Freiner will usually lead at least one of those or half a day, just reminding us why we're here and how important what we're doing is. That we're here to touch and change lives, and we have the opportunity to do that every day.
Do do you ever have any specialized training during in-service on teaching practices?
Yes, we have, especially at the very beginning and very end of the year. We will break up into groups usually, and no, at the beginning and the end. We will have meetings with our team teachers, which I don't have one because I'm the only classroom, so I'll go meet with kindergarten and just talk about, their new curriculum or new assessments, or what are you seeing, what are you changing that I can touch on, and how can our learning stretch across the board?
Do you feel part of the kindergarten team?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Come in.
One thing.
Do you think that they, how is that sort of, I'm not talking about necessarily your interpersonal relationship with them, but more your, like, thoughts about how children progress from your classroom to their classroom? Is there ever interactions about that?
Oh yes,
And how does that?
to transition them to kindergarten from my classroom, we start in the spring, and I'll take whenever what is it? Read Across America. For Read Across America Day, kindergarten has invited us into their classroom before to watch, a YouTube video of a famous, I don't know who the guy was, but a famous athlete reading Dr. Seuss. There's a day that we tour the school several times throughout the year, but to transition to kindergarten, there's a day we go into each of the kindergarten classrooms and they get to meet the teachers, and each of the kindergartners will tell the pre-K something they love about kindergarten. So the kids understand it's not taking tests instantly. It's still playing and it's learning, and there's blocks just like we have in our classroom, and there are kitchen sets like we have in our classroom, and they will learn to read and write, but they're going to do it by playing games just like we do. And we'll sing some songs that they sing, and then we'll start singing those songs towards the end of the year if we don't already. And then to transition them to kindergarten, we have I will usually write something about each child, what they like, their strengths, their needs, and send that on to the kindergarten, and anything I may know about, family or home situation that may affect them or may change before kindergarten. If grandmother has guardianship, but she's going for custody, mom in and out of the picture, things like that, I'll write them a note so they know what to expect. And it also gives them an idea at the beginning of the year. They're stronger students, for lack of a better term, who may be leaders for other kids that may need a nudging and may need support in a certain area. And then at the end of the year, I also go back and say, okay, now this year, what did you see that the kids were really strong in? What do you see? What do I need to touch on? Fairy tales is what they usually tell me. Now the state is telling me to shy away from fairy tales.
What kind of feedback then do you get from the kindergarten teachers? Do they come back to you sometimes and say, I got this kid and you said this about them and this is what I'm finding?
Oh yeah.
And
that's another positive in working in a small school is that it is. We have a lot of opportunities to they'll catch me and say, "Hey, listen, what's going on with him?" Because he's struggled lately. And this year, for instance, one of the teachers caught me in the gym and said, "Hey, listen, I have this boy. He's really, really angry, really angry." And I said, "Really?" Because I never saw that. He was one of the sweetest, kindest, quietest. And she said, no, he balls up his fist, will shake and say, I hate school. And I said, talk to Grandma, because Grandma is really open. Grandma is also very overwhelmed. She just got 3 boys because Mom was incarcerated. Know now that Mom is out. Talk to Grandma and see if Mom's maybe back in the picture, because she'll be open enough to tell you.
Right. Does Do you think that you ever have any influence on their developmentally appropriate practice in kindergarten, first grade?
Influence on their developmentally appropriate. How?
So, I've been down to your classroom.
You know what?
So your
Yes.
classroom's set up beautifully. It looks very early childhood. Do you think that sometimes your interaction with the kindergarten teachers is affecting the way they teach,
I do.
and or vice versa?
Yes. And here's a good example,
doing
because
affect your teaching?
My youngest is in kindergarten this year. So I have a great opportunity
sure.
to see papers that come home and things and realize that they're learning. Yeah, like one time this year, he was rainbow writing his name. I started that, and I got that from a teacher at New Simpson Hill. Whenever I went to her classroom,
Right.
and all it is just his name printed out in light gray, and he practices with one color, and then goes back and practices with another color until it's really bright like a rainbow. And to the kids, it's their name, it's their letters, and they're making it colorful. And in the fall, we use fall colors, and in the spring, we use colors like flowers or the sun. And we talk about the colors and sometimes say them in Spanish, but they don't realize that what they're really doing is learning the correct way to write each of the letters in their name.
Do you
So I
ever
thought
feel
that was neat.
isolated as the pre-K teacher?
No, sometimes I like it.
Tell me about that.
Sometimes I like, well, to be honest, when I was student teaching, they told us in college, stay out of the workroom. There's gossip in the workroom. I don't go in the workroom. And I do work with a great group of teachers, good Christian people, but I do like that I'm down there. Sometimes this is my first year working with Miss Amy, who's downstairs now. She's the aide in the classroom now. But the aides usually tell me what's going on, and sometimes I don't want to know.
Talk to me a little bit about you. This year you started having, this is your first year to have a coach. I think her name's Diane Ritchie.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about what she does.
It's fantastic.
Okay.
It's wonderful. I love her. When the state comes in for an evaluation, the state is coming in, and this is their program. It's the program that they provide, and they're coming in to make sure that you're doing it according to, their guidelines. But they don't tell you exactly how they want those guidelines
have you
met.
had an assessment yet?
Yes.
Uh-huh. And so was it like the Eckers assessment?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
It was Eckers. It was a whole compliancy
Right. Uh-huh.
assessment.
And so how did that make you feel?
Normally, I'm great with it. They just happened to come at the end of a very difficult year where I was actually out of the classroom for, I believe, 4 weeks. And the sub that covered the classroom was wonderful. She was a retired teacher from here, and I came back in and thought, wow, were you a teacher? Did you have your own classroom?
Huh? I've taught, yes. I had a classroom.
Then you know
for a
what
while.
it's like to have a sub come in, and I mean,
Right.
it's just difficult for someone to do exactly what you want. They don't know your
course.
kids, they don't know your routine, and sometimes you come back from certain subs and think, that's not exactly what I had in mind. But I walked in and thought, wow, she did a great job.
Uh-huh.
You could see it the first time I walked in, so that was wonderful. But it just was a difficult year that they got us on, and we still got. INCRA actually sent a certificate that we were the gold standard, and we later realized that with the state we are actually is it bronze?
Probably.
So we were
bronze,
right
silver,
on the
and
cusp.
gold.
So
So,
there were things that
is
I
there
feel
information that you received from those assessments that were useful in your
no.
teaching practice? Because
Because after the assessment, I had a lot of unanswered questions. We were marked down for having equipment that is not in mostly good repair. And I didn't understand why. And the assessor's note said that there was a red plastic chair with stuffing showing. And I yeah, actually stood with my head to the side staring at the chair thinking, is that really the chair she's talking about? Because all it was there was a little corner of the leather that was scuffed, but it
Right.
wasn't stuffing. I mean, I really, when Mr. Frainer came down to my classroom, I said, look at that. That's the chair they're talking about. That's in good repair. I can fix that with a little piece of red tape. It would be helpful if while they were here, if they still assess, but if they could say that needs to be covered. Whenever Diane Ritchie came in, well, another thing that Miss Ritchie helped with was that I had out fairy tale books. One story was Goldilocks and the Three Bears. I got marked down for having stories or pictures of characters that might be frightening to some children. And I thought, what? And then I realized it was Goldilocks and the Three Bears because there's a picture of Papa Bear whenever he realizes someone's eaten his porridge with an angry face on. And so I asked Miss Ritchie, I said, how can you teach pre-K without Goldilocks and the Three Bears? And she said they actually aren't big fans of fairy tales. I said, good to know.
So tell me how Diane's helping you. Are you using the data from those assessments? What's the process when she comes? Do you have like sort of an improvement plan that you've created or what?
Not yet. She's been twice. The first time she came in and she observed. The second, and then we talked about certain goals. So yes, I guess a program, it's just not all written out in a... but we talked about certain goals.
Established some goals.
Oh yes. One of those being to add music to the classroom, to rearrange the class, which she told me not to worry about it yet, but I did because it bugged me. To rearrange the classroom, we had snack time in the morning as a separate, it was 10 minutes of snack time. And she said that the state would really rather see that as part of the free play, because then children have more of a choice, which I like that they have a choice. My afternoon class does still have their own separate snack time because the afternoon usually have very different home lives and because their schedule's very different. Because of certain kids I have who get pulled out for physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech therapy, I need my free play as soon as they get here. And because a lot of them are coming from Head Start and it's difficult for them to transition and then go straight into, some type of lesson or really anything but free play. They need to get up and move. And so it's difficult for me to do snack at that time because they've just eaten lunch. So we still have snack at the end. But with Miss Ritchie, since she came the first time, I've changed my daily schedule, which allows more time during free play. We've changed the classroom because she looked at the tables and she said, I know those are for snack. But if state comes in, they're going to think you're doing worksheets. She said your classroom is not set up more for play as it is for sitting. So we took a table out. And we don't need it anymore. And it took us a while to get used to doing snack as a choice. And the kids too. They're used to all sitting. Today one girl said, but I wanted to eat snack too. And I said, yesterday you went first. Today you're going to eat a snack, but you just need to wait until there's more room. So you can free play or we can finish this book. You can read with me. And she did. By the time we finished the book, it was time for her to eat. So
how do you feel about a person coming in your room and making these suggestions or trying to meet state priorities or standards?
I love it. Like I said, the state comes in and evaluates and says, here's what you're doing, here's what you're not. I feel like Miss Ritchie is coming in saying, here's what they want, here's how you do it. Here's a few suggestions. One of them being my lesson plan. My lesson plans, and I told Miss Ritchie I have ADD. I have severe ADD. So my brain is either chaos or it is super organized. My lesson plans were so organized that she looked at them and she said, this is wonderful, but is this for 1 week? And I said, yes. She said, how long did this take you? I said, a couple hours. And she said, let me give you something else that's going to simplify that for you. One thing she's going to give me, she said she'd bring on her next visit, is keywords for each of the standards, because I was writing the number, the 16.A.EC, lowercase e,
Right.
and then the whole standard. And she said, what the state wants to see is that if you post your lesson plans, parents should be able to see what your goal is.
Uh-huh.
And I said, do you know how much time that will save me? That's going to save me so much time because I don't even remember all because I know before I write the lesson what I'm wanting to touch on and why and what students I need to touch on it with and how I can differentiate that with other students. My lesson plans, the way I was writing them, she pointed out it looks like you're doing the activity and then you're going back and finding the lesson plan or the standard that you want to touch. I said, that's because I have to go back and find the number, the description, I'm going back and doing all that. So she gave me a new template. She said, this will help you, and I want you to first think why, and then think how, rather than vice versa. So when she came back, I had the lesson plan template she gave me, and then I had my lesson plan template. And I said, okay, I changed it, and tell me what you think. And she looked at it, and she said, this looks wonderful, except I want to know how you're going to touch each child. And so I said, look at the next box. So right below it, it had differentiated instruction that had kids' initials on it.
That's
that said,
fantastic.
yeah, she said, that's it. You got it. So
Sounds like a really great system.
it is. She's wonderful.
You're using Teaching Strategies Gold. Are you using their
We're
assessments?
teaching strategies. We're not online.
You're not online
And she
because
told
you
me,
don't have
get
the
online.
resources to do that, or
We do. I just need to get it.
oh, okay.
I really thought that the teaching strategies paper would be simpler, and it's not. Basically, after talking to Miss Ritchie, she said you need Teaching Strategies Gold because it's going to combine all of these things. One thing, I wish I would have brought one with me. One thing I have in the classroom is I keep a portfolio for each child that's separated by the learning areas. So for language arts, the very first thing is a couple of their rainbow writing, which now I'm taking out because those are worksheets. But just name writing on their artwork, name writing in the Dairy Queen. Whenever they take someone's order, they'll write their name on it. I put it in the book several times a year so that you can see the growth. But a lot of things in there are like social studies. Whenever we walk down to the fire station, I take pictures of the kids at the fire station, add it to the book. Miss Ritchie told me the book is wonderful, but the book is only an addition because the book is snapshots of what they're doing. She said, just to make sure that I'm focusing on growth rather than I'm not wanting to just hit each standard. I'm wanting to show growth with each of those standards. Where was I going with that book?
We were talking about Teaching Strategies Gold and
Teaching Strategies Gold.
Going to the online
One
system.
thing that I lack in my books is a summary of their development in each area. And I said, I know I need to. It just would take forever.
Takes time, right?
Yes. But Teaching Strategies Gold will basically,
create it for you
Yes.
in some ways.
based on what I put in their portfolios, rather than me marking their portfolios and then having to go back and write a summary for each area for each child.
What other kinds of support for your teaching do you think that you need, or what are your greatest challenges? Are you connected with any professional organizations? Do you go to any conferences?
I do go to conferences, and Mr. Frainer is actually the one that usually tells me about them. Usually ones that Tanya's so involved in. So he'll come and say, hey, listen, there's this. Do you want to go to... I know when my oldest boy turned 5, there was a conference in Springfield. And so he came and said, hey, listen, there's this conference this weekend. It was in September. And he said, there's also a huge car show if you and the kids want to go. And I said, yes, that's Bryce's birthday. And his dad was a mechanic. So, that was perfect. But they paid for, the hotel and my food, and they covered the conference. And
Is it useful in your teaching, the things that you kind of come back from with the
Oh, yes.
conference, or how does it affect your teaching practice?
Oh, it's extremely helpful. Really, just because I don't know.
Uh-huh.
You know, I think it would be very easy without that to take the term pre-kindergarten to the extreme. Because a lot of administrators are preparing students for high school, in grade school, which means that they are preparing students in junior high for high school, and for younger grades for the upper grades. And pre-K seems to be, with the testing getting pushed down further and further, pre-K seems to be more, it's becoming kindergarten. And 3 to 5 year olds aren't always ready to write their first and last name, and they're not always ready to start blending their letters by the end of the year to make words. Sometimes.
So are you saying that you feel like that going to conferences helps you to feel...
Going to conferences helps provide more developmentally appropriate practices that will reach the same goal, but developmentally appropriately.
Well said.
Rather than just worksheets. Because my kindergartner has a lot of worksheets. That coming from the pre-K teacher, though.
Do you serve on any committees here in the school? Faculty committees?
I do not right now.
Okay. Is there any other teachers in the school that you would consider your mentor?
I would say several. Of course, there are teachers who, it's a small town, so there's people that I know, and there's teachers that I had when I was here. So I know one of the first grade teachers, I'm going to be heartbroken when she retires, but there's been times that I've gone to her, or even some of the junior high teachers at the top of the stairs, I've just gone up and closed the door and said, hey, listen. Questions about association things, and just, especially when I was a new teacher, there are things I went in and said, hey, listen, I just heard this. Is that typically how that happens? Am I misunderstanding?
If there's one thing that you could have that would really make the difference in your classroom, what would it be?
All-day program.
Wow, that was a very clear and direct
All-day
answer.
program. Every year except this year and last year. Last year I had a almost full class all year. And this year I don't have a full class. Every other year that I've taught, I've had a wait list of about 15 kids. And I know my son's in 3rd grade, and it was a huge baby boom the year he was born. I know that. He's been in a huge class all the way up. And it just seems like we had huge classes, and now it's just kind of dwindling down.
And you don't have a full day program because supposedly you need 2 sessions to have enough children to support the grant.
Supposedly the grant wants us to reach as many students as possible. However, a lot of those students are coming from Head Start to us, so they are being reached.
And what is your relationship with Head Start?
I have a great relationship
with
Head Start.
What is like...
Oh, the Head Start...
So it's just that, like, they send, like, if they have morning kids and they send them to you in the afternoon or vice versa...
They send some morning kids to us. It's depending on, it's the parents at the beginning of the year who will enroll at Head Start and then come enroll in us. And then I will call over and talk to, I didn't even know the name of her title. She's the parent coordinator or someone else at Head Start.
Family advocate or something.
Yeah, right. And get the names and addresses, well, not addresses, but the names of the kids who are going to be coming over. And then usually the parents will sign something at the beginning of the year if their students are dual enrolled, that we can share information about their child between. So I can call over to Head Start also and say, hey, this is happening with this child. What do you know? And so they can say, well, the worst case scenario is my very first year, Head Start called and said, hey, I want to give you a heads up. The child told us that Dad did this yesterday. We called DCFS. Dad was arrested that day. And they said, Mom wasn't there today, hasn't called, isn't returning our calls. We don't know how she feels, what's going on. Mom called me 3 days later sobbing and said, I can't go home. I believe it happened, that we have proof that it happened. So it was great that Head Start gave me that heads up. And I said, listen, let me call you back. And I called her back and said, of course that was a conversation that you never want to have ever. But it was good that we had that heads up. So we knew what was going on. And then I could talk to Head Start and say, listen, I saw some warning signs that I look back now that I wouldn't have known. And had Head Start not called, I wouldn't have known the severity. And now I know warning signs to watch. So when I do see things that aren't really enough to warrant a phone call, but it's enough to warrant some concern, I can call Head Start and say, hey, listen, here's what I'm seeing. And if Head Start says, okay, well, here's what they said. And again, here, at Head Start, it may be the same thing. They just see one or two small things, but that's when it's time to make a phone call so that someone else can see what's going on across the board.
Anything else you think that might be useful in my study of understanding how instructional leadership works in your school?
No.
Okay.
No, I wish I could, but not that I can think of.
No, you've been very, very helpful. Thank you.
A program, my PAC, Parent Advisory Committee. The meeting is tomorrow, and Mr. Frainer is always a part of that. And he actually came to me at the beginning of the year and said, we need to get this scheduled. I'd like to see it, the beginning of November. And he came in with Miss Ritchie and said, what's something that we can talk to the parents about? And Miss Ritchie even has given me ideas about, parents volunteering in the classroom. She said that they may frown upon that now, but when she was in the classroom, she said if parents wanted to volunteer, they had to attend 2 trainings at the beginning of the year. And I said that would be wonderful to give us the opportunity to, explain to parents we will not be able to socialize with you.
Right.
It's nothing against you, but we are still here for the students, and we'll be happy to discuss anything before and after. We cannot discuss your child in front of the other children or your child. We cannot discuss other children. And what you do see in the classroom is confidential because,
of course.
And so it would be nice to explain that to families. But I told her, she said that also gives the parents an opportunity to tell the teachers what they need. Like they need to know. I don't even know, because I said, how do parents know what they need to know until they're in the classroom? So the Parent Advisory Committee, I sent home a family survey last week that said, what ways do you find receiving information is most helpful? Notes home, newsletters, the What We Did Today board, the parent board. What do you and your child discuss activities that are done in the classroom? If so, what? Did you receive a home visit at the beginning of the year? What are all the ways that you have or are willing to be involved in the school? Open house at the beginning of the year, the Christmas program, donating materials for a party, volunteering in the classroom. And then at the Parent Advisory Committee, we'll sit down and discuss, what parents said on those surveys.
Have you looked at the results of the survey yet?
No, some of them. I don't have very many back yet, but hopefully I'll get them back tomorrow.
I'd be really interested in helping you with that if you want some help.
Okay. I know I did that one year, and it was actually Miss Amy and her husband that made the,
I'm writing a book on family involvement.
Really?
It doesn't have anything to do with this study, but I'm writing a book on family involvement.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, it's about leading for family engagement. and what early childhood teachers can do, and how schools create this environment where parents feel welcome. And those questions that you ask are really interesting to me. Those are good questions.
One thing we did, I'll give you, there's a copy of the survey on the board. I can run down and get one
That's
for you
okay.
before.
Well, if it's something you feel like you'd like to share with me
Well,
at
sure.
some point, I'd love to take a look and see what your results were.
Okay. I know one suggestion that was really helpful was that one year before, the week before Thanksgiving, we talked about how, the Indians taught the Pilgrims how to plant corn and all the different ways to cook it. One day we had canned corn, one day we had popcorn, one day we had cornbread, and a suggestion the parent said was, my child doesn't like canned corn.
Uh-huh.
So what do you do in that instance if they don't like canned corn? They don't get a snack that day? And I said, no. So this year, every year
You have
after.
an alternative snack.
Well, no, we just do, like today was pineapples and pretzels.
I see.
It used to be pineapples one day, pretzels one
Now
day.
it's
That way,
both.
it's both. You get more food groups and
Right.
kids get more choices.
There you go.
And with the corn, now we do popcorn, canned corn, cornbread, in one day. So they get to try all three.
Cute. Great. Any other comments? Any other questions that you have for me?
I don't think so.
Terrific. It's been excellent. This is
Any
exactly what I
suggestions
needed.
you have for your family engagement, send them back this way. I'll take them.
I'll send you the book if we can get
Do it.
If we
I would
get
love it.
If I get it published. So
I would love it.
thank you so much. I appreciate you
thank
taking the
you.
time. I know it's hard to leave your kids, and you probably missed your parents. So probably missed your parents. So probably missed your parents. So probably missed your parents.